Hello, my name is Judith Hawley. I'm a professor of English at Royal Holloway, University of London, and I'm the chair for another episode in the London Luminaries series of showcase talks. Tonight's event will have a slightly different format. Usually the speakers from our partners give a talk and slideshow, and then in the live broadcast, they take questions afterwards. This time, our speaker, Clive Francis, is unavailable because of his professional commitments. He is a successful working actor. So he and the team from Garrick's Temple have recorded a documentary film for us. I hope you'll agree that this different format presents a really interesting insight into the subject of the career of the 18th century actor-manager David Garrick. It also gives a wonderful view of the temple to Shakespeare that Garrick constructed on the bank of the Thames by his villa in Hampton. Let me tell you a little more about our speaker, Clive Francis. As well as being instrumental in the restoration of Garrick's Temple, Clive is a successful actor, and you might have seen him on your screens in The Crown or on stage in Richmond recently. He's also a playwright and a brilliant caricaturist. Some of his drawings of Garrick and his friend Samuel Johnson can be seen in one of the previous talks he's given on this platform. Let us now watch the film he has made for us. David Garrick, The Man Behind the Mask.
Welcome to David Garrick's Temple to Shakespeare. My name is Clive Francis, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this magnificent jewel of a folly that is nestled here upon the banks of the Thames in Hampton for almost 270 years. It was constructed in 1756 in honour of the one man that Garrick revered above any, William Shakespeare, whose plays Garrick had perfected and performed always with great success throughout his long and distinguished career. A strikingly similar structure can be found in the gardens of Chiswick House, where the Garricks spent their honeymoon a few years earlier. Given Garrick's theatrical flair and aesthetic sensibility, it is not unreasonable to suppose that he wanted to capture an essence of that temple here in his own corner of Hampton. Now, the temple stands just across the road, if you can see it through the railings and trees over here, and rather noisy traffic. This was his grand riverside villa. But here in the temple was very much an extension of his domestic and intellectual life. Here, amidst busts and books and relics, Garrick would come to study, learn his lines, compose his letters, of which he wrote a great many, and entertain his friends on long, warm summer evenings beside the Thames. It was a place of both reflection and performance, a personal shrine to his artistic idol. Now, 10 years ago, I had the great joy, the great honour, in fact, of showing the late Timothy West and his wife Prunella Scales around the temple when they stopped off here on one of their canal journeys down to the English Channel. Oh, goodness gracious me. Oh, dear Prue. I'm so thrilled to welcome you here today.
Wonderful.
What a lovely place you've got here. It is a nice little place, yes.
Like David Garrick, we both owe so much to William Shakespeare.
I feel I should genuflect.
Oh, well, he would have appreciated that, believe you me. Yes. And this is the great Roubiliac statue of Shakespeare, which Garrick, of course, posed for, as you can imagine.
Clive continues a temple tradition and offers us tea, just as the great actor Garrick would have done.
He was the sort of Laurence Olivier of his day, but in terms of stardom, he was like the Beckham of his day. Huge, huge star. Before him, all the performers used to declaim very loudly on the stage, to come down to the front and shout. Well, they had to, because the audience were talking most of the time. They weren't listening to the play. And it was Garrick that really quietened them down.
Garrick insisted that guests to his temple pay for their visit with an ode in praise of Shakespeare.
Oh, Garrick, you'd have better start him his monarch of the stage.
Tim, I hope you're feeling inspired. We need the bard to bless our journey.
Able.
Sickeningly good at
I'm
this.
terribly impressed this is just coming off the top of your head like this.
Enjoy thespian camaraderie.
You're sickeningly good at it.
Shall I read it to you?
Yes, please.
O Garrick, monarch of the stage, our thanks that in this modern age we're able to enjoy with tea and thespian camaraderie the chance to view with warm regard his temple to the immortal bard. Here, in this peaceful Thameside haven, who cares for Stratford-upon-Avon?
Absolutely perfect.
Stay with us.
Well, he'll bring you all the luck you want. But listen, it's been a great treat having you. It really has. Thank you so much for coming. God bless you, my darling.
And it is here within this serene rotunda that I'd like to invite you as well. And come and explore the many stories and see the images behind this remarkable man, David Garrick. For in the many faces of David Garrick, captured by brush and canvas, we see not just a man of the theatre, but a man in pursuit of legacy, of art, and perhaps, above all, immortality. You know, for someone who was small, overweight, and blessed with a rather prominent nose, David Garrick was, aside from the monarch of the day, one of the most frequently painted figures in 18th century England. The Garrick Club, for example, has 19 adorning its walls, the National Portrait Gallery over 50, and the Hereford Museum, which was Garrick's hometown, of course, a record 77. And that's not including the Folger Museum in Washington and various stately homes and private hands around the country. Yes, his face became as familiar in drawing rooms and print shops as it was upon the stage, and the visual record of his career is unparalleled in theatrical history. Artists of great distinction such as Hogarth, Reynolds, Gainsborough, Zoffany were among the many commissioned to capture his likeness in roles both public and private. Now, it's important, of course, to recognise that many of these portraits that you can see here were not incidental, but carefully orchestrated by Garrick himself. When he and his wife, Eva Maria, embarked on their grand tour of Europe in 1763, Garrick would write ahead and announcing his itinerary and his willingness, of course, to sit for any of the leading artists of the day. It was as much a campaign of self-fashioning as of self-promotion. Garrick understood, I suppose, perhaps better than any actor of his age, the enduring power of visual representation. An early example, you might say, of embracing the power of social media. And yet, for all his magnetism and theatrical brilliance, he proved to be an extraordinarily difficult subject to paint. His energy, so vital on the stage, translated poorly to the fixed stillness required in the studio. I mean, he was notoriously restless, seemingly incapable of maintaining a fixed pose for more than a few minutes. Now, compounding this was a fastidious concern with how he was being represented. Garrick was acutely conscious of his image, of course, and exercised an often maddening degree of control over the painter's work. I mean, he would object either to the angle of his chin or the curve of his smile or the glint in his eye. Portraiture to him was not simply a matter of likeness, but of legacy, of how he would be remembered. This perfectionism, allied with his unpredictable temperament, could test the patience of even the most seasoned portrait painters. On one occasion, Gainsborough, exasperated by Garrick's ceaseless fidgeting, flung his brushes across the room in a state of despair. And he wasn't the only one to suffer, believe you me. Take, for instance, Hogarth's striking depiction of Garrick as Richard III, painted in 1745. This is no ordinary portrait. It is theatricality captured in full flight. The scene is taken not from Shakespeare's original tragedy, but from Colley Cibber's widely popular, if heavily truncated, adaptation. A version that dominated the 18th century stage and famously includes the line, "Off with his head, so much for Buckingham," a phrase cheekily borrowed by Laurence Olivier in his 1955 film adaptation. Now, Garrick's performance in this particular role was nothing short of transformative for both the play and the actor. It marked his sensational debut in 1741 at Goodman's Fields, which was a relatively obscure venue, far from the prestige of West End. He was just 24 years old and was billed with deliberate mystique as a gentleman who never appeared on any stage. Now, within days, the city was buzzing. Audiences were electrified by his naturalistic style and his emotional immediacy. And the astonishing psychological nuance he brought to the part, I mean, it was in every sense the performance that launched a legend. Even Alexander Pope, never one to dish out praise lightly, believe you me, Garrick never had his equal and never will have a rival. Garrick's mentor, Charles Macklin, the Irish actor, later wrote that Garrick didn't just play Richard, he became him. The power of his imagination was such that he transformed himself into the very man, and the passions rose in rapid succession before he uttered a word and were legible in every feature of that various face. The scene was a masterclass in psychological depth. And when he awoke from his nightmare, Macklin recalled he was a spectacle of horror, his voice ringing through the theatre as he cried, "Give me another horse!" It was moments like this that cemented his reputation, not just as a great actor, but as a true force of nature upon the stage. You see, Hogarth's portrait captures the essence of Garrick's performance with astonishing precision. It depicts the pivotal moment in Richard III when the king, asleep on the eve of the Battle of Bosworth, is jolted awake by the ghosts of those he has murdered. One arm, as you can see, is flung upward, his face frozen in horror, reaching instinctively for his sword. I mean, you could almost feel the terror, the weight of his crimes crashing down upon him. This is no theatrical posturing. It's something far more internal, more disturbed. Yet even this powerful image was meticulously composed. Garrick wanted not only to be seen, but to be remembered, not just on the stage, but on the culture of the time. I mean, today it remains one of the most iconic portrayals of Shakespearean performance and is housed in the wonderful Walker Gallery in Liverpool. I mean, if you look closely at Richard's left leg, and you'll notice the garter. Traditionally, this would bear the motto of the Order of the Garter, "Honi soit qui mal y pense," shame on him who thinks evil of it. But Hogarth, wickedly, has angled the garter so that only one word is visible: mal, bad. I mean, the irony is biting. A king clad in the regalia of England's highest chivalric order, yet branded unmistakably as corrupt. It is also known that Hogarth was forced to revise the face repeatedly to satisfy Garrick's sensitivities. So much so that he eventually cut out the canvas around the head and inserted a new piece in its place. Not the first time he would be forced to take such measures. Also, Garrick's body is twisted into an elegant serpentine line, a stretched S shape that Hogarth considered the epitome of beauty. He would later make this shape central to his 1753 treatise, The Analysis of Beauty. Now, interestingly enough, the Champion newspaper of the day described Garrick's performance as neither whining, bellowing, nor grumbling. His mien and gait neither strutting, mincing, nor slouching. And when 3 or 4 were on the stage with him, he was attentive and never dropped his character when he had finished a speech by either looking contemptuously on an inferior performer, unnecessarily spitting, or suffering his eyes to wander through the whole circle of spectators. Well, I mean, praise indeed, but gives you a very, very worrying aspect of how actors were behaving in the 18th century. Dreadful. Not that I would do that, of course. Now, there is another portrait of Garrick as Richard III, painted in 1771 by Nathaniel Dance Holland, depicting the king leading his army at the Battle of Bosworth Field. I mean, this is obviously just a print. but it was painted in Rome while the Garricks were enjoying their grand tour of Europe. Originally, Downes had promised the portrait to Eva Maria for a mere 50 guineas. But she'd even cleared a spot at her drawing room wall for it. But one evening over dinner, Downes casually announced that he had changed his mind and was selling it now to a wealthy baronet for double the price. Well, I mean, poor Eva Maria, she was absolutely mortified by the betrayal. But Garrick, of course, ever a showman, waved it off. "Oh, think no more of it," he whispered. "I have something even better to replace it." And true to his word, the next day he asked her to come and see the new picture. There, hanging on the wall, was herself, with Garrick smiling over her shoulder. It was indeed an elegant mirror, for which he had paid 150 guineas. Now today, Downes's painting, which is much larger, of course, than this one, hangs in Stratford upon Avon's Town Hall. We at the Garrick Club have an extremely good replication of it. Now, despite the incident, Garrick forgave him, and 7 years later, the artist sketched an intimate scene of the Garricks at their breakfast table. Eva Maria, serene in a lace cap, while David, in relaxed attire and his own hair, no wigs, of course, for breakfast, sat with his arms on the table, looking up in that quick, lively way of his. He later declared it the best likeness ever taken of him. Another Hogarth painting of Garrick and Eva Maria. Now, despite their close friendship, it's said that Garrick and Hogarth fell out over this particular portrait, now part of the royal collection. The painting, in fact, captures Garrick in a striking blue and gold outfit, facing the audience with a quill in hand, while Eva Maria elegantly reaches to take it from him, embodying the classic image of a muse inspiring a writer. On the desk, you can just see the freshly written opening lines of Samuel Foote's play, Taste. Now, but once again, Garrick wasn't happy with how he was portrayed. In fact, X-rays reveal that Hogarth may have gone so far as to scorch out his eyes and repaint them, suggesting a sort of back and forth conversation between the two of them over the final likeness. There's also evidence that the background was altered entirely. Originally, the sitters may have been in a domestic setting, but this was later changed to feature a column and hanging cord, giving the painting a more grandiose feel. Yet curiously, when Hogarth died the following year, the painting was still in his studio, raising the question, did Garrick actually ever take it home? Well, apparently he did, as it became one of Mrs. Garrick's very favourite paintings and was not sold until after her death the following century. Now, William Hogarth died in 1764, just shy of his 67th birthday, and Garrick wrote a rather moving epitaph. "Farewell, great painter of mankind, who reached the noblest point of art, whose pictured morals charm the mind and through the eye correct the heart. If genius fire thee, reader, stay. If nature touch thee, drop a tear. If neither move thee, turn away. For Hogarth's honoured dust lies here." Sir Joshua Reynolds painted this elegant conversation piece of the two of them in around 1772 in their garden at Hampton. It was exhibited at the Royal Academy and can be found today in the National Portrait Gallery. Some believe it not to be the happiest of efforts. Garrick, in his best velvet suit, appears to be reading his dearest Eva Maria to sleep. Either that or she's suddenly becoming overcome with acute boredom. Garrick's friend, Dr. Burney, confided to Johnson that he thought Davy was beginning to look rather older than his years. "Well, is that not to be wondered?" said Dr. Johnson. "I mean, no man's face has had more wear and tear than his." Macbeth. Now, over here we have one of my favourite pictures actually, is Mrs. Pritchard and Garrick as Macbeth. This was painted by the young German artist Johann Zoffany And he got his big break in doing this in 1768, when Garrick hired him to paint a scene of himself performing in this character. This was about as close as Zoffany ever came to capturing real tragedy. And he chose a particularly intense moment from Act 2, Scene 2, where Mrs. Hannah Pritchard, snatching the daggers away from her husband's hand.
Firm of purpose! Give me the daggers! The sleeping and the dead are but as pictures. 'Tis the eye of childhood that fears a painted devil.
As Macbeth, Garrick's costume is rather striking: black shoes, white stockings, red breeches, and a blue-green collarless coat edged with broad band of gold braid and gold buttons. He also wears a red waistcoat, similarly trimmed with gold. But then there are many who considered Garrick's outfit rather extravagant for a battlefield commander. Certainly not the ideal costume for committing murder in. Well, then neither was Lady Macbeth's resplendent outfit any more practical. She appeared in a purple silk dress trimmed with ermine over a white silk petticoat, a matching purple silk bodice, and a yellow shawl striped with silver, an outfit that exudes both status and menace. Now, according to Arthur Murphy's Life of Garrick, Garrick's transformation after Duncan's murder was really quite chilling. He describes how the actor returned to the stage like a ghastly spectacle, and his complexion grew whiter every moment. Well, it has been suggested that this haunting effect was achieved by Garrick by simply wiping off his stage makeup before reappearing, giving the impression of a man visibly drained of life by his terrible deed. At the time, Garrick made a very bold statement, claiming that this was Macbeth as Shakespeare wrote it, which ruffled more than a few feathers, as you can understand. The James Quinn, for example, the great tragedian of the day, was deeply unimpressed. "What does the fellow mean? Don't I play Macbeth as Shakespeare wrote it?" No, would have been the honest reply, as unbeknown to Quinn, he'd been using the Davenant's version, in which the three witches appear as vampires, attended by furies, who dance and sang to the beat of a drum. Not Shakespeare as we know it. But you know, if I'm honest, I don't think Zoffany quite rose to the occasion. Lady Macbeth, towering over her husband, is every inch the commanding, ruthless figure she's meant to be. But Garrick, on the other hand, looks less a tormented king, more like a startled toad caught mid-pirouette. Not exactly the terrifying figure of Shakespearean tragedy. Nevertheless, Thomas Davis, in his 1784 dramatic Miscellanies, gives a very good description of this particular moment when he says, "The representation of this terrible part of the play by these two capable performers can no more be described than I believe it can be equalled. The dark colouring they gave to this moment in the play makes the scene awful and tremendous to the auditors. The wonderful expression of heartfelt terror that Garrick felt when he showed his bloody hands can only be conceived and described by those who saw him." I mean, that being said, for me, the honours of the night go to Mrs. Hannah Pritchard, who famously declared that she never read any other part of the play but her own. And once the hand-washing scene was over, she would instruct her carriage to take her straight home. There's no curtain call for her. You know, her sheer presence, physically commanding and bursting with energy, threw a new and lurid light on the murder. In contrast to Garrick's constant indecisions, she made the play more gripping than ever. Now, not everyone, of course, was a fan. Dr. Johnson dismissed her as a vulgar idiot who acted mechanically, while even Garrick found her clumsy and accused her of blubbering tiresomely in moments of grief. But he knew full well that his own performance relied entirely on hers. And when Mrs. Pritchard died in 1768 at the age of 57, he never attempted Macbeth with any other actress again. In this particular image, Zoffany depicts Garrick as Lord Chalkston from Lethe, or Aesop in the Shades, a dramatic satire written by Garrick when he was only 23. Lethe was intended as an afterpiece following the main evening's entertainment, a standard practice in playhouses during the 16 and 1800s, and became one of the most frequently performed and longest running of all the farces. In 1777, he was summoned to Windsor Castle by George III, not, as he presumed, to become the first actor to receive a knighthood, a distinction that eventually fell Henry Irving a century later, but to read Lethe to the king and court. Unfortunately, the evening was not a success, not at all, as it was deemed inappropriate to laugh in the royal presence. The play, Lethe, is set in the sylvan groves of the underworld by the banks of the river Lethe, whose waters bring forgetfulness. Chalkston has arrived in Elysium with some difficulty due to his gout and rheumatism. He is described as a merry soul despite his difficulties. "None of your waters for me," Chalkston says to Aesop, the wise philosopher. "I never drink any but at Bath. I came merely for a little conversation with you and to see your Elysian fields here, which, by the way, Mr. Aesop, are laid out most detestably. No taste at all. No fancy in the whole world. I mean, your river there, what do you call it? Aye, Styx. Why, 'tis as straight as Fleetwood. You should have given it a serpentine sweep and clear the woods to the left and clear the woods to the right, to that clump of trees over there. Though, upon my word, here's a very fine ha-ha and a most curious collection of evergreens and flowering shrubs." Well, Chalkston's gout is depicted in Zoffany's painting by his rickety pose and the firm use of a stick. Dressed in a vibrant red costume that exudes power and authority, Garrick embodies the essence of Lord Chalkston with great finesse. Although the play was first performed in 1740, the part of Chalkston wasn't introduced until 1776 in time for Kitty Clive's benefit. Kitty Clive, of course, was one of Garrick's famous leading ladies, and she originated the part of Mrs. Riot, a mannish gambler untethered from spousal control, and both her portrait by Pieter van Bleek and that of Zoffany's as Lord Chalkston hang in the Garrick Club. As Mrs. Riot, Clive was formidable, and thanks to Lethe found a new popularity in self-wounding roles, especially as a blousy, aged fine lady. Now, Francis Hayman's painting up here depicts David Garrick and Hannah Pritchard as Ranger and Clorinda in Act 4, Scene 4 of The Suspicious Husband, a comedy by Dr. Benjamin Hoadley, which was first performed at Covent Garden on the 12th of February 1747. Ranger has been flirting with a masked lady, unaware that she is in fact his cousin. The painting captures the moment when Clorinda, unmasked, leaving a disgruntled Ranger to declare to the audience, "I must brazen this out." It has become almost a cliche to remark on the curious success of certain questionable works championed by the great actors of the past. The Suspicious Husband is certainly one such piece, a play that ought to have been consigned to the dustbin of history a long time ago. I mean, even Garrick expressed his doubts, remarking, "Whether Ranger will appear next winter or sleep forever in the escritoire, I, for one, cannot say." Dr. Hoadley's Suspicious Husband reads badly and is unlikely ever to be revived, yet remained one of the best comedies produced during Garrick's lifetime. Consequently, Ranger, the honest young rake written especially for him, became a fixture in Garrick's lengthy repertoire. "Now am I in an admirable mood for a frolic," says Ranger. "Have wine in my head, money in my pocket, and am so furnished out for the cannonading of any countess in Christendom." At its heart, the play was a pantomimic romp of misunderstandings, disguises, and couples making sudden entrances and even quicker exits through doors and even the occasional window. George II laughed so much that he allowed the play to be dedicated to him. Its popularity was such that it was performed 16 times in one season and remained one of the most successful pieces to grace the boards at both Drury Lane and Covent Garden. Now, the two other great Zophanies that adorn our walls here are what is known as conversation pieces, and were painted during the summer of 1762 when Zophany was invited to stay with the Garricks at their home in Hampton. Both paintings depict David Garrick and his wife as a fashionable, well-heeled couple enjoying the landscape grounds, well, laid out, of course, by Capability Brown, of their Robert Adam designed country house. Here, in the first picture at the top, the couple are shown entertaining Colonel George Bodins, a noted wit and gentleman usher to George III. A keen amateur gardener, Bodins may well have offered his hosts advice on planning certain aspects of their garden. At the centre of the painting sits Eva Maria Garrick, poised and demure, while her husband is shown offering a cup of tea to his brother George, who is fishing by the river. Yeah, I'm standing attentively behind, presumably ready to serve their guest, is Charles Hart, the Garrick's faithful butler. David's brother George, who played such an active part in his brother's life, often acted as Garrick's personal secretary and assistant, particularly during his years at Drury Lane. Known for his reliability and discretion, George handled correspondence, finances and logistics, allowing David, of course, more time to focus on all his theatrical work. Now, in the second of these two pieces, the Garden Hampton House, this is called, Mrs. Garrick is shown perched on the balustrade of the temple, leaning on her husband's shoulder as he gestures towards a boatman, presumably waiting to ferry him down the river. The young nephew Carrington is playing on the steps alongside Biddy, Eva Maria's beloved spaniel, while Charles Hart enters from the right bearing refreshments. Interestingly, Carrington chose not to go into the theatre, but chose the church instead, becoming in time the Reverend Carrington Garrick. Through the doorway, you can just glimpse the statue of Shakespeare by Roubiliac, a replica, of course, which stands here in the temple and in the very niche that Garrick especially designed for it. The rather massive dog in the foreground is Garrick's favourite mastiff, Dragon, immortalised in verse by Hannah More. "O dragon, change me with thy fate, to me give up thy place and state, and I will give thee mine." Garrick hung the pair in the dining room of his newly acquired house in London, number 5, the Adelphi, also built by the Adam brothers. They now adorn the walls of the dining room of the Garrick Club in London. Which brings us, of course, to the famed Roubiliac statue of William Shakespeare. Louis-François Roubiliac, the French sculptor who settled in London at the age of 27, has been described as perhaps the most accomplished sculptor ever to work in England, particularly in the Rococo style. In 1758, Garrick commissioned him at a cost of 300 guineas to create a life-size statue of William Shakespeare. Ever the director, Garrick couldn't resist staging the moment himself, striking the precise pose he had in mind and declaring, "Lo, the Bard of Avon." With every likeness made of him, whether in canvas or stone, Garrick found fault. But this time, the criticism was not directed at himself, but actually at the marble. A streak of blue veining, most unfortunately, ran across the bard's face. "What?" cried Garrick. "Was Shakespeare's face marked with mulberries?" Roubiliac, honour-bound and artistically proud, agreed to hew the head from the shoulders and carve a new one from purer marble. The join, if you ever see the original, of course, can still be seen just above the collar. Now, also in the temple, we have the reproductive copy of André Soldi's painting of Roubiliac up here, which hangs in the Garrick Club. His shirt over the neck and wrists suggest he is gripped by creative inspiration. Worldly matters like decorum are forgotten. I rather love that, one of my favourite paintings. And so, there you have it, a brief glimpse at some of our fascinating exhibits here at Garrick's Temple to Shakespeare. It's open every Sunday afternoon from 2 o'clock till 5 o'clock from April to October. Please come and visit us, and you'll be guaranteed a very warm welcome and possibly even a cup of tea.
O Garrick, monarch of the stage, our thanks that in this modern age we're able to enjoy with tea and thespian camaraderie the chance to view with warm regard his temple to the immortal bard. Here in this peaceful Thameside haven, who cares for Stratford-upon-Avon?
Thank you to Clive and his team. Wasn't that wonderful? I hope you enjoyed that film as much as I did. As well as giving you an insight into Garrick and his world, I hope it's made you keen to visit Garrick's temple. It really is worth going to see. In the summer, it's a lovely place for a picnic, and Garrick himself used to picnic there, as you might know. They also have a regular concert series featuring a range of talented performers. Do check their website for details. Now, let me encourage you also to watch the next in our series of London Luminaries showcases. On the 7th of August, our speaker from Emery Walker's House will talk about the brilliant artist and craftswoman, May Morris. You can book tickets on our website and watch recordings later on our YouTube channel. Goodbye, and thanks for watching.